from God's authority. This is the very first idea that he starts with here. He's writing this letter to the church, and he's saying, listen, your strength is not in how good you are. It's not. Your strength is not in all the good that you do. Your strength is actually from the goodness of God. It comes from the Lord. My pastor growing up used to say it this way: everything above hell is by God's grace. And he's reminding the church that when we start to talk about this topic of authority and relate it to the church, we have to remember that all of us, every single one of us, come under the authority of God. Our strength is understanding that authority. Then he begins to lay out a framework. And I want to hit this real quick. We're going to talk a lot more about this in our midweek service. We're also going into a brand new series this fall. We're going to talk more about this as well. But I want to give you kind of an understanding. First, you understand that you're under God's authority. You're under God's authority. I love this. Children, obey your parents in the Lord. You know why? Because if you did it in the flesh, it would depend on how perfect your parents are. He says, do it in the Lord. Why do we have to do it in the Lord? Because I don't care how good of a parent you are. Okay? Your kids are going to need Jesus, and probably because of something stupid you did, some counseling. Come on. That's just a fact. So he's saying this is so much bigger than just the human beings in front of you. This is where you begin to understand authority. This is why Satan is trying to destroy the family. This is why he's breaking up moms and dads. This is why he's turning children against their families. The Bible says in the end times, you'll know God's revival's coming to it because he will turn the hearts of the children back to the parents. Why? Because that's where the authority is. And so this is really important. We have to be under God's authority. We learn that in our homes. None of our parents are perfect. Notice it didn't say, love your parents. I've been around some parents and they're not very lovable. But it does say honor them. What does it have to do? It has to do with something in your own heart, in your posture to them in the Lord. Next, we see God's authority in our family. He teaches children to obey their parents, because here's what happens. If you can learn to obey parents, right, that aren't perfect, you will learn and posture yourself to be able to serve and honor a God who is. This is very important. We learn about our relationship with God through our parents. As a pastor, I've pastored, for about 10 years, but I've been saved for about 28 years. And I tell you, every issue that I have in my relationship with God comes from some dysfunction in my relationship with one of my parents. It always happens. Many of the things you struggle with in your life, we're going to talk a lot about that in the series Stronger coming up. We're going to talk a lot about how to rewire some of those things in your heart and get a biblical mindset on how to overcome them. Next, we see God's authority in the church. God's authority in the church. So you see where it's going. We're under God. We learn authority in our family, and then God places us into a greater spiritual family. He says in Ephesians 2:19, so then, you are no longer foreigners or strangers, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of God's, everyone say God's, of God's household. So when we understand the hierarchy of this authority, when we practice it with our parents, when we live it being planted in the church, next we're able to see God's authority in our work. There's a path that he's walking you through. Many people, they're so unhappy with their job. Number one, it's because they're not under God's authority. They think that they're just doing a job for an earthly master. That's not what we just read, is it? It says you're working as under God. When you understand that you're under God's authority, all of a sudden you can put up with a jerk. That's a boss. All of a sudden you can put up with some of the things that you and I have to struggle with this side of heaven. When you understand God's authority in your family, you can actually take your authority in his family. It's all connected, and then it funnels down into your work. This is what the Apostle Paul has to say about what we do. Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, I love this. Whatever you do, in a room like this, I couldn't possibly guess what all you do. As we approach a brand new school year, I have no idea where your feet are going to end up. Some of the things you're going to be a part of. Some of the places you're going to be. Neither could the Apostle Paul. So he's writing to this church and he's saying, whatever you do, whether it's in traffic, whether it's in the pickup line at school on the first day, and they're trying to figure it out, we would appreciate some grace. Thank you. Right? Whether it's in your job, no matter where it is, whatever you do, do it from the heart as something done for the Lord and not for people, knowing that you will receive the reward of an inheritance from the Lord. And then, just in case you're wondering, you serve the Lord. That's a reminder we all have. Next, our authority is from Christ, but our battles are spiritual. The Apostle Paul lays out this structure of authority, but then he immediately goes into the spiritual battle. Now, pastoring in a military town, I didn't quite understand why in the world they train you so hard when I moved here. Why is it that they take you to this thing called basic and all of these different courses throughout your career, where the sole purpose, I learned this from a commander, the sole purpose is to actually strip you down so that they can build you back up. Why? Because not if, but when you have to encounter battle, you have to fall in line. Meaning there has to be some muscle memory that just takes over when you move, right? So when you understand authority, right, you can then begin to be prepared for battle. Our battles are spiritual. Remember this truth. This is a big, big truth. What you see with your eyes is not all that exists. The Apostle Paul pivots from this idea of authority, and he begins to talk about the spiritual battle, and he reminds every one of us, because we need to be reminded. You know why? Because we're in a material world.